If you know my personal media story, you know that I'm a Rush baby. I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh's gargantuan talk show, the king of radio. I listened to him as a kid in the 90s on car rides home from school, and I was an avid listener all the way through the end of his life. I'm sure that many others like myself were curious to see who would step into the massive shoes that Rush left to fill, and of course now you know that Dan Bongino would largely assume the role of the midday spot on talk radio stations across the nation. Dan is definitely his own animal. There's nobody like Dan, there's nobody that has a show like Dan, and one thing that differentiates him from most of his fellow talk show hosts is that he rarely has guests on his program. So whenever he makes an exception, it's noteworthy, and it's probably for good reason. Now, locally, Dan Bongino airs on News Talk 98.7 WOKI, and one of our local politicians was just invited onto Dan's program for a short segment. Now, keep in mind, this is a massive national audience, so it's a little bit strange to have a local politician on a radio program that people all over America can hear. But that's exactly what happened last week, and you'll see why, as Dan invited Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs onto the program to talk about a few things, from which we'll take a look at a few of these moments. For starters, Dan talks about Glenn's history as Kane, the wrestler from the WWE. If you've never seen Mr. Jacobs, he is a towering man, a monster, and that's without the cane mask he would wear. Now, I like to tell others, my mayor can kick your mayor's tail. But anyways, after that, Dan asks Glenn Jacobs his thoughts on what we're calling the police state, the weaponization of law enforcement, and the politicization of the court system that we're observing in our country today.
No, when Thomas Jefferson wrote that all people are created equal, he didn't say that they were endowed, or he didn't mean that they were all endowed with the same talents and abilities. What he meant was they're all supposed to be equals under the law, and as seen by the government. And that's not the case anymore. We have two classes, the politically connected and the rest of us, frankly. And what the folks on the left need to understand is, as this continues, at some point, they're going to realize that there are two classes: the rulers and the ruled. And they think that they're going to be in the ruling class. They're not. They're going to be just like the rest of us. That's what's happened around the world.
So Mayor Jacobs is saying that if we continue down this road and the liberals continue to support the police state, referring to the weaponization of the various federal departments like the FBI, the DOJ, etc., and these federal judges keep prosecuting former presidents and pro-life activists while serious criminals are being let out the back door, we will continue to see our country become a real police state, a totalitarian regime, which has happened numerous times in history.
It's incredibly tragic, and it's very sad, because we are becoming a banana republic. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. When you can't speak your mind, when big tech and the government collude to silence dissenting voices, when you see what's happening, I mean, you're talking about keeping Donald Trump off of the ballot in certain states.
Right.
You may not
That's
like
insane.
Trump, but what in the world? You want to talk about election interference? The weaponization of federal agencies and deciding we're going to prosecute these people, we're going to prosecute Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden's over here, just ignore what he did. We're in a terrible, terrible situation. And if this continues, we're going to go down the path that so many other great countries have gone down, which is from freedom back to tyranny. We're headed there like a rocket sled on rails at this point.
So you hear him describing something like that of a banana republic. That's just describing a country run on despotism, or an oppressive, totalitarian, iron-fisted government where anarchy rules the streets and political dissidents are punished. This was the case for a while in the Central American, Latin American countries, but nowadays it still persists in some places there, but also in African countries. Glenn Jacobs says this is the inevitable end of the way things are going in America, and he's right. But Dan talks about getting us back on track and how we do that next.
You know, as a medium-sized kind of place, maybe not really a small town per se, but small enough, you see it. I mean, the principle of subsidiarity, you see it up close and personal, which is the best management is local management. Because obviously you get to know people by face and by name, and their votes matter more too. And that's a good thing. As a mayor, you want to know that you're accountable to your constituents. You see it better than anyone. But if we're going to change this country, you know, Jordan Peterson argues in his book, 12 Steps, about how we got to start making our own bed first. And I think the American Renaissance is going to start in places like Knox County, where people just say, you know what, we've had enough. We are citizens of the United States of America. The Constitution matters here. The sheriff abides by it. I'm the mayor. We're going to abide by it. If you want to do something extra constitutional in your liberal city and burn that place to the ground, then you know what? I don't approve of it, but I can't stop it. It's not going to happen here. And I think that's where the Renaissance is going to start. And I'll bet a lot of the citizens and your constituents feel the same way.
Now, I disagree with the last sentiment that we should just let other states and cities destroy themselves. And I say that because we're the United States of America. Now, you're going to hear Mayor Jacobs talk about what is referred to as federalism. He doesn't use that term, but that's what the Founding Fathers intended. You'll hear him mention the 10th Amendment, which we'll look at in a moment, but here's Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs talking about this idea of federalism and the American revival happening in smaller places like Knox County.
Here in Tennessee, when we look out at what's happening in other parts of the country, we just shake our heads. We're a great state. I don't generally praise politicians very often, but I think our General Assembly has done a really good job. And frankly, Dan, you know this, that's where the power is supposed to reside. It's not supposed to reside in the federal government. That's an organization with very limited defined powers. Most of the authorities reside with the state and also with localities by extension. That's what the 10th Amendment is all about. And I absolutely agree with you. I think actually the single most important thing that folks can do is ensure they have good people in their state legislatures.
The 10th Amendment was one of the initial amendments to the Constitution in 1791, and it says, "The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people." All right, so this is the idea of federalism. We are a system of, at this point, 50 states who each have their own systems of government. They can legislate and run their states however they wish, unless, of course, they are defying the foremost authority, which is the United States Constitution, not the United States government. So legally, yes, the 10th Amendment officially created this independent-ish system. But we are the United States. We are one country, so that means the states do affect each other. They affect each other in the national economy. They affect each other in matters of security and culture and product. They affect each other every election cycle. And the same can be said of this cultural rot we're experiencing. Things happening all the way up in New York and all the way over in California are knocking on our proverbial door here in Tennessee. And in my opinion, it's un-American, and it isn't good Christianity to just sit back and allow the cultural rot to happen just because they're not in Tennessee or Knoxville. Now, in the Bible, we're described as the body of Christ. If there's a disease in my foot, eventually it's going to affect the rest of my body. I can't just let it rot and fall off. It's going to infect the rest of me. So the hand can't say, well, that's the foot's problem. No, that's how you wind up in the hospital, or worse, in the ground. But Glenn Jacobs is correct in describing the federalist system, the limited power of the national government and the importance of the states. And going back to something he said earlier, this is just another check on tyrannical power from the framers and the founders, thank God. another roadblock to authoritarianism or totalitarianism. But next, Mayor Jacobs is going to talk about the prevention of liberalism as people leave their blue states to come to places like Tennessee.
We're going to have to build a firewall around our states to essentially keep some of the foolishness out. One of the things that we've seen here is there's a lot of folks moving here from the blue states, and of course folks here get nervous because they think they're liberals coming in to take things over. The folks that I talk to, they're political refugees. They are fleeing the blue states and coming to some place where people think like them. And I think that what we're going to see across the country is we're going to see an even further bifurcation of red and blue America. And the red's going to get redder and the blue's going to get bluer. And I'm with you. It's like, man, you guys do what you want over there, but leave us alone here.
Leave us alone.
And let the people decide which is the best. I guarantee you we'll win when that happens.
Now, that sounds like some great news, and Glenn sounds like he's onto something there. So it's good to hear that the people coming here from blue states are like-minded, or more so like-minded, people who are fleeing these liberal policies, these policies on economics and crime and taxes and safety, etc. So Mayor Jacobs is saying that the more this happens, the more people leave these blue areas to come to red areas, the closer conservatism is to victory, meaning defeating liberalism. Now, I wish it didn't have to be that way, but it looks like there's not much else that can be done but to see these places utterly devolve into nothingness, these places that were once wonderful places. However, you've heard it said that politics is downstream from culture. In other words, the things that happen in government and in politics happen because culture happens first. That is the arena in which Christians are called to make things happen. This is where we should be the salt and light of the earth. This is where evangelism and discipleship should be happening, because Jesus can transform the culture. The Thessalonians, before the letter to the Thessalonians was written, the people in Thessalonica referred to Paul and Silas as these that have turned the world upside down. We can, through the power of Jesus Christ and the help of His Holy Spirit, turn this culture upside down, just as Paul and Silas and the other apostles had done in the first century church. These places that have devolved into madness, they can't be fixed by administration of policy, but they can be by the administration of the gospel. Now, it seems like Glenn Jacobs is headed towards higher office here in Tennessee. Dan Bongino sort ofly said as much in the interview, so keep your eye on Glenn Jacobs for the next gubernatorial race in succession of Bill Lee. Until then, he's our Knox County Mayor, and we'll keep supporting his fight for civil liberties. You probably need some roof repairs. If you feel that water dripping every single time it rains, or those shingles on your roof are starting to look bad, the sooner you act, the better. So call my friends over at Turner Exteriors for an estimate on your roof today. If you tell them Blake sent you, they'll give you $500 off your new roof. Now, I know the guys and gals over at Turner Exteriors. They do fantastic work. You'll love the new life they bring to your home.